the millennials come down to the Gen Zers is that they're not afraid to speak up. They're not afraid to push the envelope. They're not afraid to challenge you, right? And the Gen Zers, they're a whole cup of tea by themselves, all right? It's a totally different mix.
This frightening moment sometime, maybe looking at your client who maybe, of course, who are observing what is happening in their workplaces, and they come to talk to you so that you can help them, of course, in the communication, because I think sometimes you are bridging the gap between the employer and the employees in trying to have a better rapport, because that is why the work is settled, because if there is an acrimony going on all the time, and we will not be able to be efficient in what we are doing. So my question there really is, what is their complaint? I mean, the employer of labor or the director of businesses that are contracting you, what are they complaining to you about these different dynamics?
Now, a lot of times you see companies say, we've been in existence since 1840. The place was founded in 1917 and all of that. And they have all of these policies and these rules and these regulations that, stem from way back then. And now in these, 2000s, they want to come with the same approach. Hello, Obehi. Thank you so much for having me again. I am Nicole Farrel. I'm all the way in the warm Caribbean, Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. I actually wear a few hats in business. I am in image management consultancy and communications and PR, public relations, of course. So, it's a pretty interesting mix for me, but it's something that I genuinely love and I'm very passionate about. So I'm there to help organizations become more structured and also to help female entrepreneurs get their branding together, their personal branding, so that it's cohesive and so that they can build on it as the years go by.
All right, this is very important now. So you also do image management for
Yes.
company, which is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, today the conversation that we are having is around Gen Z communication in workplaces, type of communication, and how to make sure that everything is working fine in the company, because that is essentially what is going to be about.
Yes.
All right, let's start with image management. What do you mean by that? Help us understand it.
Okay, let me start off with the misconception that people have. A lot of people think image management consultancy only has to do with your attire, right? It only has to do with your makeup and your hair, the clothes you wear, your accessories, and all of that. That is just part of it. Now, there are some image consultants who only deal with wardrobe styling, which is fine. But in terms of what I offer, I tend to do a holistic thing. So I don't only concentrate on the wardrobe styling aspect of things. But let me just stay on that for a second. What I do as well in relation to the wardrobe styling is also wardrobe branding. And this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs don't even think about. They just think, oh, well, I just want to put on something to look cute. I want to look cute, I want to look stylish. But your wardrobe branding is important because that also paints the picture for people in terms of what you want your brand to be associated with in terms of perception. So you also have to dress in such a way that it aligns with your overall branding goals, right? So that's one. Now, the holistic part of it that I deal with is public speaking. I coach people in terms of speeches, work presentations, anything along those lines of public speaking, even things like this. Podcast interviews, radio interviews, television interviews, or doing magazine features, right? That's an important aspect of things because, of course, when you go in public, wherever you show up, whether it's online or offline, you are representing your brand. So that is one thing. And you can look how pretty you want to look, but if you're not executing properly, if you're not speaking a particular way according to your brand, then it's totally off. So there's a public speaking aspect. Another thing that I help clients with is with your body language. Your body language says a lot, right? And this is something that you also have because again, you can look how cute you want, but if you go up there and you look timid and you're shy and you give off a whole different aura. So it's that confidence building aspect of things that I also do with clients, right? So it's wardrobe styling, wardrobe branding, public speaking, body language coaching, and I also do photo shoot coaching. Now, this one, some people are usually surprised by this, but again, a lot of, well, not a lot of times, but sometimes you have to do photo shoots for your business or even for your job, right? Your 9 to 5 job or your 8 to 5 job. And a lot of people, once again, they think it's just about doing, getting their makeup done, getting their hair done, wearing something cute, and just smiling for the camera. And that is something totally different that I offer in the sense that it is not just about showing up and smiling for the camera. It's about how you pose according to your body type, which is another thing I do for clients. I do a body type analysis. So, depending on your height, your size, your dimensions, there are certain poses that would be most complementary to you, right, during your photo shoot. Also, in terms of your face, there's something that I've termed as facial branding, right? And that is something that also gets people like, wait, what, what is that? But yes, your facial expressions can also be part of your branding, right? You may be the type of entrepreneur who, you want to give off a certain type of presence, right? So you may not want to do the cutie type of photos or whatever the case is. So your facial expressions are very important in this aspect of things. And that is the face branding. So I help with the posing head to toe. Or if you're doing headshots, we're going to get this upper area properly done, right? And your even as far as your hands, how you place your hands, how you place your fingers, how you place your feet, all of these things. It's a total um, in-depth approach to how I do these things. So I wanted to give clients the opportunity to have a holistic set of services because one thing, branding has to be very cohesive, right? So if I'm doing something, somebody else is doing something, somebody else is doing something, it's very possible that with all the cooks in the mix, something is going to get thrown off. So if they have this one person who is overseeing everything, I'm getting acquainted with your brand already, right? So I know certain things. So when whatever it is we have to do, then I'm able to see, well, okay, this is the direction that we should go in so that everything remains cohesive.
There are of course, a lot of moving parts in what you have said there, from the images to how you present yourself to how you talk, which is there for your communication, both
Yes.
verbal and non-verbal communication, the body language, and I can see a lot of moving part there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, all of this is summed up under the title branding, and because that is what I see reflected there. So help me understand it. How do you define the all these different dynamics in your appearance, in your communication, your presentation, in branding? How do you determine which one is going to be more appropriate for a particular brand as against maybe another brand? Help me understand that.
Okay, one of the things that I have to do with clients is we have to do a consultation. And with this consultation, I find out certain salient points when it comes to their business, when it comes to their goals, right? And that gives me a lot of insight so that I can start to strategize, I can start to conceptualize. That is a very important aspect of things because it's a very um, personalized service. So it's not like you're coming to me and I just start to give you instructions and I just say, well, okay, this is what you need to do, that's what you need to do. That's kind of crazy, right? It's like if you go to an architect, they don't ask you a question and then they want to start building on your land. That's crazy. You know, how can you do that? You don't have an idea of what type of house they want. You don't know how, how deep you have to dig and all of that. It's crazy. So it's a it's a type of in-depth approach that you have to do, and you have to get that background knowledge first so that you'll be able to build on what it is the client wants. It's very important to do that. So that's how I start off with that.
Thank you so much for that. Now, I want you to tell me a little bit about the importance of communication in workplace, because now we're going to move into Gen Z and how they impact communication. But before we get there, communication itself in a company, in a business, how important is it and how should it be approached so that a business can have a good communication? Because if you don't communicate what you really want to communicate correctly to your
Yes.
audience or to the public, you're not going to get a feedback from it. So help me understand how you approach that, or how businesses should approach that.
The thing about it is, if we start off in terms of where a lot of organizations and companies are right now, they have this very archaic approach, right? And mindset to how things should be done. Now, a lot of times you see companies say, we've been in existence since 1840. The place was founded in 1917 and all of that. And they have all of these policies and these rules and these regulations that, stem from way back then. And now in these, 2000s, they want to come with the same approach, right? And what they have to understand is there is an impact when it comes to generations. That is something that we cannot escape. We have the baby boomers, we have the Generation X, we have the millennials, we have the Gen Zers, right? And what tends to happen is a lot of these companies want to still operate the way they operated in the height of the baby boom era, right? And some of those things just aren't going to work in these 2020s. A lot has changed. And what you see is a progression of the mindsets and the behavioral patterns of each generation happening. So while it's fine to have policies and rules and regulations and all of that, it has to be tweaked because they have to consider that these generations have a different type of motivation, they have a different type of mentality, they have a different type of approach, they have a different type of everything you could think about. So it has to be something that is considered by them. So it starts off with them saying, okay, this is what we want to do. But if we want to do this, how is our workforce going to respond to that? Right? So you may have the Gen X um, group responding a particular way. The millennials might respond a particular way. The Gen Zers may respond a particular way, right? And what you've seen from the millennials come down to the Gen Zers is that they're not afraid to speak up. They're not afraid to push the envelope. They're not afraid to challenge you, right? And the Gen Zers, they're a whole cup of tea by themselves, all right? It's a totally different mix. So these companies and these organizations, they have to think about it and say, well, okay, how do we approach it so that it can be a more amicable way of doing things. How can we communicate this to them in a particular way? Because the way they did it before with baby boomers and even Gen X groups, it sort of cannot be done with these younger generations. You have to find a middle ground. Otherwise, you're going to lose them, and otherwise, it's going to be an uphill battle right through.
All right, this Gen Z, Gen S, and the different Gen, what is responsible for this shift in communication and perception and understanding? Can you share something with me in line with that? Because now I'm also thinking if this can be something cross-cultural, or is this sort of general or limited, or depending on the type of culture that you are referring to. And of course,
Mhm.
here we will be more concerned about the African diaspora or the African people, as it were. So I'm trying to understand if this behavior is cutting across all cultural background, or is limited, or it depend on the type of culture that is in focus here. Please let me understand that.
Actually, what I have witnessed is basically across the board. It's in North America, it's in the Caribbean, it's in the African continent, it's in Europe, it's everywhere, right? If you look at it, you see traces, you see that evidence of that almost everywhere you go. So it's not really confined to any one culture or anything like that. It's something that has just inherently happened across the board. So that's why it has to be such a widespread approach to understanding that this is where we're at now. Yes, we would like for certain things to be a certain way, and I'm not saying to be lax on your policies or your rules or regulations, but I'm saying there has to be that consideration given to what the generations bring to the table. It's just like, like when you have children, yes, you're raising all of them with the same morals and the same values and all of that, but you may have a different approach with each child, right? Because everyone brings a different personality. So you may deal, and it's not that you love them any less or you treat any one of them any less, but you have a different way of dealing with them, a different way of approaching them. And it's sort of the same principle when it comes to dealing with the different generations in the workplace. Because Gen Zers, which are the younger ones, those in their 20s and some, they don't care. I don't want to put it like that, but they don't care. They want to do this, they want to do that. They have no issue with challenging a thought or a policy or whatever the case is, right? They have no problem protesting against something. The millennials, those like in around their 30s and that kind of thing, um, they're sort of a mix of the Gen Zers and the Gen X, right? But they're also ones who are going to challenge. They're going to challenge the status quo. They're going to, say, well, hey, this is how I think, and I don't agree with this, and I think it should be done this way, and I don't want to subscribe to that, right? With the Gen X group, which is like those in their 40s, and that whole category, um, they used to kind of toe the line a little more, just like the baby boomers will. They may not like something, but they're not going to rock the boat, too much or at all. And they just toe the line and go with everything, right? And they mumble in the background and they mumble by the water cooler, you know. But now it's a different thing. And because you also have that advent of social media, and you have so much coming at you all the time. Everybody's telling you how to think, everybody's telling you what to do. So that has definitely concretized the way that a lot of the Gen Zers and the millennials are thinking, because it's sort of like compounding the ideas or the ideologies that they already had. So that is bolstering them. And it's like, well, this is proof that I'm doing the right thing. So it's all of these things. So these companies and organizations, they cannot bury their head in the sand and say, well, this is how it has always been, and our workers have always done this, and our workers have always done that. Yeah, but as you go along, you're going to be getting younger and younger people. The baby boomers, and they have retired, right? Some of them have gone back into the workplace, right? But a lot of them are retiring. So now you have the Gen X and the millennials and the Gen Zers, right? So it's getting younger. So you cannot use that same approach. It has to be a meeting of the minds, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. All right. As you are explaining this different stratification in the society, I am trying to think if it's a question of age in the sense that the one that we are referring to as Gen Z are now, by the time they grow up, of course, we have a different name for those that are going to come after them. Whether this attitude in workplace is going to remain with them as they grow old, or is going to, the more they grow old, the more maybe they drop the attitude that they have now, the behavior that they have now, both in their workplaces and of course in life in general, because they do sort of have a different kind of mentality, as we all understand. But what I'm trying to see there is it something that is generational, or is it something that is just okay, you will say, okay, they are children. By the time they grow up, they will drop those attitudes, something like that. If you could say anything in that line.
The thing about it, with that is it also stems from home, whether people want to believe it or not. Now they do say you cannot make your child's mind. You can make your child, but you can't make your child's mind. But the thing about it is, with every generation, there's a different type of parenting going on. The baby boomers, even those before the baby boomers, I can't remember what they called them. But they were stricter. It was like, this is my way, and it's my way or the highway. The baby boomers came about and they sort of softened the edges on that, but it was still fundamental in terms of having respect and growing a particular way, and being a particular type of human being. And with the Gen X kind of adopted some of the attitudes and ways of the baby boomers and even those before them, right? But now you also have that little blurred line between some of the Gen X, some of the millennials, and the Gen Zers who have a different approach, and some of them were raised differently, right? There weren't as many rules, there weren't as many calls for being accountable to stuff. And as they say, there are a lot of babies raising babies. So now it's a whole different thing. Now you have seen where some millennials at some point they begin to mature, they begin to see things a bit differently. But one thing I've observed with a lot of millennials is they see things in black and white a lot. They don't see things in color too much. So it's like, well, this is what I think and this is what I believe. And it's very hard to get them to move aside from that. They sort of clench their teeth into that, right? And then with the Gen Zers, a lot of Gen Zers, they're that kind of free spirit. They don't want a lot of rules. They don't want a lot of labels. They don't want a lot of responsibilities, really. They just want that easy, breezy, instantaneous kind of life, the soft life, as they like to call it on social media. So it's I don't know how it's going to read for the Gen Zers, because to be quite honest, some of the things that I see with Gen Zers, some of them, it's frightening. It's like, okay, what direction are we going in again? Like, what is going on? This is concerning, but hopefully in time they mature. But you do see some maturing happening with the millennials.
All right. Now, talking of this, this frightening moment sometime, maybe looking at your client who maybe of course, who are observing what is happening in their workplaces, and they come to talk to you so that you can help them, of course, in the communication, because I think sometimes you are bridging the gap between the employer and the employees in trying to have a better rapport, no? Because that is why the work is settled, because if there is an acrimony going on all the time, and we will not be able to be efficient in what we are doing. So my question there really is, what is their complaint? I mean, the employer of labor or the director of businesses that are contracting you, what are they complaining to you about these different dynamics of the Gen Z and the workplace communication?
One of the things is like, oh, they don't want to do anything. Or a lot of complaints are things on being on time, not fulfilling their duties properly, not being very self-motivated, right? Not having too much of a team spirit. These are some of the common things that you hear them talk about a lot. But again, it goes back to understanding that one, this is sort of how they are, but two, a lot of organizations, I don't know what has become of the screening process and the hiring process, but it's certainly not the way I knew it to be, when I came out of college, or when I, did my university course. Like it seems to me now it's very sort of slapdash, even though they say that you have a second round of interviews and a third round of interviews. But I sometimes wonder what is going on, because they're choosing these people, and then they're not even training them, which is another issue that I have with organizations and companies. They're not training people, they're just bringing them on. And again, that might have worked for the Gen X generation, but it doesn't quite work for these millennials and these Gen Zers. You have to set the tone, because when you come into an organization, one, there is a culture within that organization, and two, there is a particular image that you want to uphold. So when somebody comes into your workplace, you have to train them towards that. Because once they fall into that, and they fall into what they see their other coworkers doing who've been there for a while, especially if it's been negative, then it's very hard to rein that back in, because it's like the horse has already left the stable, they've already left the blocks. It's going to be really hard to get that horse back inside, right? So you have to set the pace of it. You can't let that happen and then say, well, hey, you're not supposed to do that, you're not supposed to be this way, we don't tolerate this. It can't be like that. You have to set the tone. And even for me, within my business, whenever I have to work with a team, or I have to work with a team member, I'm very particular. I don't apologize for that at all, right? Because I know the vision that I have for my brand, and I know what I want. I know how I am going to show up, and I know how I want my team to show up. So even in terms of my team's attire, because there isn't a uniform per se, right? We may do theme colors or something like that, but I'm very, very particular about how they show up in terms of their dress, in terms of how they speak, in terms of how they interact with people and all of that. Because at the end of the day, this is your brand. You have to take care of your brand. That's your baby. I can't just tell people to come in and hope that they know what my brand is about, or that I hope that they know how to do the right thing. I can't take that for granted. So I have to lay that foundation. I have to set that tone. And that is what companies need to do. You can't just bring in people and think that it's going to be the same way as before. And another thing they have to remember is, even within the school systems, the curriculums have changed. Some of the things that we would have been taught in secondary school, or high school, as they would call it, um, those things have changed. Even in terms of elementary school or primary school, as we call it, things would have changed. So some of the things that we were trained in, some of the things that we were taught, a lot of these younger people aren't being taught that, and they aren't being trained for it. So it starts there. So if they aren't getting that training, and then they go into the workforce, they're not going with that knowledge, right? They're lacking that knowledge. So you can't expect them to know that, which is why you have to ensure that when they come in, you give them the proper guidance. Otherwise, you're really taking a gamble.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
I remember a couple of months ago, I was interviewing the head of National Orientation Agency in one of the states in Nigeria, those states specifically. So we were talking about still this generational thing in Nigeria, no? That they, in their time, the current crop of politicians in Nigeria, to be specific, most of them actually benefited from what is known as free education in the country. But now in Nigeria, there is no free education anymore. And
Oh.
somebody there would like to ask, but what has happened? It's usually a generational thing. Is that somebody have given you a ladder to climb up. Then
Mm.
when you get to the top, what do you do? Do you break down the ladder and remain there, play the zero sum game that you are now the winner? So every
Hmm.
other person need to suffer,
Right.
or you let the ladder, you let the flow continue like a stream. You don't block it. You let everybody begin to enjoy it. So what I was saying that is there is somebody need to take responsibility, because we cannot just simply say the Gen Z have a different behavior, so maybe it is their fault, or maybe because first of all, we are all product of education. If we have a certain behavior, that is because we have a certain type of education.
Hmm.
If we are giving quality education, we will behave qualitatively. If we are giving poor education, we will behave poorly. So I think at the end of the day, it rests on the parent, on the type of children that they produce at the end of the day. Sometimes also in the society, because yeah, we are all part of the entire system.
Hmm.
So what I'm really I'm going there is, do we really blame this on the Gen Z? I mean, the kind of behavior that we have today in the workplace, where maybe some employers of labor are complaining of this type of behavior that the Gen Z are demonstrating, or do we take responsibility in it so that we can change it? Of course, the game is slipping away a little bit in the hands of their parent, because their parent, okay, they are not young anymore. Things are changing now. You have given birth to children who have grown up, so they are going to become parents very soon. Sometimes they become like dry fish. When a fish is dry, you cannot bend it anymore. If you try to bend it, it will break.
Hmm.
So we just have to maybe see who is going to take responsibility for this, and what can we do to address it for the sake of those who are going to be here after this Gen Z. What do you have to say
Yeah.
about that?
The thing with the well, remember some time ago I mentioned the parents, right? How things have evolved in terms of how people are doing parenting. Even now, you have the gentle parenting uh, stance that they like to talk about, right? Which is way different to how some of the baby boomers and those before them raised their children, right? Now, like I said, there is some responsibility on the part of parents because it sort of starts from home, right? A lot of times what you do home, you do outside. But like I said, we make children, but we don't make their minds. But at the same time, if you get a certain type of foundation at home, you go out into the workforce kind of with that same mentality, really. So, parents, I think they do have to share in some of it, although there are the exceptions where parents do try, but for some reason, the children just don't listen. They just do what they want to do. So, I think it's that. The other thing is the school system, like I mentioned just now. Um, there are some very fundamental foundational things that have been taken away from the school system, whether it's the curriculum or just certain initiatives, really, even locally here in, here in Trinidad and Tobago, a lot of extracurricular activities have been removed from the school initiatives, right? I remember growing up, I was involved in everything. Like there was never a lack of school activities. It was always something going on, a concert, a fashion show, a tea party, um, some sort of special event, drama, singing. We took part in festivals. There was always something to do when we were in school, whether it was primary school or secondary school, which is elementary school or high school, right? For some countries. But the thing is, we always had something to do. But a lot of these activities have been removed from a lot of schools locally. So you don't have that set of extracurricular activities. And this is something that also shapes children, which I don't know how educators don't understand that. But that is part of it. It really helps you to develop a particular way. So one of the issues is the parenting. Another issue is the school system, even in terms of training children how to speak, how to write properly. A lot of teachers complain that children don't even know how to write properly. And I don't mean in terms of literacy, even, but also in terms of just proper handwriting, right? So there are all of these different things, ways in how to speak to an adult or somebody in authority. There is not that respect or anything like that. Some of the things that I see, there was no way we would do that when we were going to school. So the school system is another thing, even in terms of, and this is one of the things that really gripes me, even in terms of their appearance. Now, there is this talk, and not just in my country, although, we're not very lax, but you see it a lot in like North America, a lot of North American countries as well, where, you say, well, children have a particular freedom. They can dress how they want, they can do what they want, right? But at the end of the day, I always say you are preparing children to go into the workforce. If you have it, if you set them up in such a way that they feel they can dress however they want, have whatever, you know, physical setup they want to have, speak however they want to speak, when they go in the workforce, and then they have to deal with policies, and they have to deal with rules, and they have to deal with regulations, right? How does that fit in? Then they want to rebel because it's like, well, I'm not accustomed doing this, and well, I don't like doing it. And well, my teachers can get me to do it, so you can't get me to do it either, right? So it's now a domino effect that's taking place. So when they reach in those environments, it's like, well, I don't want to deal with this. What is this about? And now it's an uphill battle for management to get them to operate a particular way. So that's another issue. So some of the foundations that we're setting for like the Gen Zers, it's kind of setting them up for failure in a way. I mean, I don't want to sound extreme, but at the end of the day, we're sort of setting them up for failure because we're excusing a lot of things. Like one of my pet peeves is, people being at the university level. They don't know the difference between there and there, right? In terms of the spelling, they're using THERE where they should be using THEIR and all of these things. And I remember I was having a conversation with this young lady, and she was like, "Oh well, I don't know the difference in doing that." No, she's doing something at bachelor level, right? And she's like, "Well, I don't know the difference." And she laughed it off. And in my mind, I was like, "If I was your professor, I'm taking those marks off because you're supposed to know better." you know So my thing is, we have to be serious about how we shape them, how we mold them, and how we set them up. Now, I will say though that I think each generation just has this inherent way about them. If you look at a lot of Gen X people, they have a particular, they have some commonalities. Same thing with millennials, same thing with Gen Zs. It's just an inherent thing that happens, just like there are inherent things with women and inherent things with men, right? Um, so there is that, but I think that we have lost the understanding that certain things can impact people a particular way. And we have to realize that it's something that we can't just leave to chance. It has to be something that is deliberate. And another thing that has changed is the whole village aspect of things. You know, when I was growing up, if you did something wrong, your neighbor was going to tell your mother or your grandmother or your grandfather or your father or whoever, and they would deal with you accordingly, right? These days, nobody wants anybody to tell them anything about their child, or even if they do, they get defensive, and so they're showing their child a whole different type of world. So it's really not any one thing that is influencing the Gen Zers. It's really a series of things that are impacting them. But I think if you try to understand the root of things, if you try to understand the common issues, then you can work on strategies to deal with it. You can't bury your head in the sand and you can't just say, well, oh, I don't know how to act. And just one point I want to make about that, somebody may argue, well, we have hundreds of employees, we have thousands of employees, we can't deal with everybody one on one. Sure, you can't. But if you know how people think, then you can come up with an action plan to counteract that and to work with that. And a lot of times people aren't too unreasonable. If they see you're making an effort, then that's what it's about. And one thing I've learned in leadership is people just want to be seen and they want to be heard and they want to be treated with respect. But of course, respect is a two-way street as well.
Have we already lost control over the situation in terms of um, maybe what you might describe as a traditional system, the traditional family? Because you were looking at the idea that the child was raised by the village. Those are very beautiful concepts that perhaps we have lost forever.
Mm-hmm.
I am saying that because even for many Africans, for example, that are living in Europe or living in the West, they see this rebel going on all the time because they would like their children to behave like they used to behave when they were in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Because they would say things like, oh, in Africa, we used to have a lot of respect for our parents. So I want my child to have a lot of respect for me.
Right.
But sometimes it is difficult to command that kind of respect, because the kind of society that we live in Europe or in the West is different from Africa, one. Secondly, the time that we lived in Africa and the time that we are living in now is also different.
Yes.
I don't want to say whether it is an evolution of time or evolution of things,
Mm-hmm.
but my preoccupation, if I can call it like that, is we may have already lost it, no, in the sense that the children that we have given birth to, they are now already in the workplace. Very soon, they will become the politicians. They will become the military men and women. They will become the pilots.
Mm-hmm.
They will become the leader of the society. And there is nothing you can do about that. So if we wanted to give them good education, that was yesterday, not today. It is done. So we are now going to live with the consequences. Just like sounding like that. Could that be true? Because if maybe, for example, they are going to be the professor at the university very soon, because most of them, how many years are they now? They are already adults, no?
Yes.
They are actually, in my thinking, actually, I'm not even show you that is 100%. They are going to be the one to formulate their rules now. And they are going to be the one to project a different kind of future. Because very soon, their parents are now old people. What do you say about that in terms of whether we have actually lost control or we still have the chance to actually go and behave the way we used to do? Like, this nostalgia thing sometimes, it comes around all the time. Please help me with that.
Yes, it's so true because I think one of the areas that has sort of thrown us off is the fact that there's this advent of social media, right? And even just traditional media, things are very different now, right? When we were growing up, it's not that you didn't have the little salacious soap opera and all of that, but things now have been multiplied by 10,000. And we didn't have social media when we were growing up, right? So we weren't exposed to a whole lot. But now there's so much information out there. There's so many different aspects of influence that it starts from early. And then you have a lot of parents who let the devices babysit their children. That's a reality, right? So you see toddlers who are there on YouTube and who are playing some game or whatever the case is, or looking at a cartoon. And when you look at some of these cartoons, what they are calling cartoons, children's cartoons, they have a lot of adult content, or references, or underlying tones in those cartoons, right? But because a parent may think, oh well, it's a cartoon for children, so they just put it on and they go their way, and the child is there listening to it, right? So they're exposed to a whole lot more. And then if you go to school, or if you go to the rec center, or if you go to some sort of extracurricular activity, you have children who operate a certain way. You have 5-year-olds and 7-year-olds who are telling their parents whatever comes to their mind, however they feel like telling their parents. And the parents are like, oh, there was no way things like that would have happened in our time, right? So there is that reality that we have to deal with, that shows that, listen, our children are now exposed to a whole lot more. So you can try as much as you want to protect them from it and shield them from it, but it's a bit difficult, because I remember excuse me, I remember one time I had a little cousin, and they were staying over at my place. And so I was looking at television. Their mom was inside, in one of the bedrooms, and he was outside with me, but he was like, a little way behind me. And while I'm looking at television, I'm like, wait a minute, what is that? And I'm hearing some music, and then I start to listen to the lyrics, and I'm like, I looked around at him, and I said, and the thing about it is, when I turned and I looked at him, and he saw me turn around and look at him, he looked so guilty. He knew he wasn't supposed to be listening to that kind of music or anything, but there he was with his iPad, and he's on YouTube, and he's checking out everything. So he's already exposed to that, right? So again, the horse sometimes is already leaving the blocks. So it's hard to rein that back in. And then you have these children who live in homes where almost anything goes. So they come and they kind of influence children. And I don't know, for some reason, I don't know why, but children, and even, Gen Zers to some extent, it's just so easy to influence them. It's so different from when we grew up. There were things you didn't have to tell us, and we knew not to do it, right? And now I always joke that it's even surprising when I come across a child who's very mannerly and who's very respectful, because it's like you almost hardly see it anymore. Children are kind of like young adults, right? So it's a reality we have to face, but the responsibility starts with the parents. But if the parents are lacking in their duties, then it's kind of hard. I mean, you can have mentors who may make an impression on the children, but how many children will be exposed to that anyway? So it's going to be an ongoing fight, so to speak.
I wish we could really take on that for a much longer time because it is important conversation looking
Hmm.
at parenting and the generational shift.
Yes.
There are different dimensions to it. It is important for us as a society. It is important for us for the time, and it is
Hmm.
important for us also for the future. One thing I've observed looking at my research here in northern Italy, referring to the African diaspora, one situation is that a lot of people, for example, young African who came here as immigrants,
Hmm.
many of them were already having this problem in terms of having a proper upbringing to start with. No, many, I didn't
Right.
say all of them, many of them.
Hmm.
So they come here. Some of them have suffered a lot in Libya before they got here. Many of them have been abused.
Right.
And when they got to Europe, they seek asylum. And sometimes many of them, they have also gone to some torture here by other peers like them.
Right.
And they carry all these luggages. They have not been properly diagnosed so that they can weed out this memory of bad experience that they have had.
Hmm.
Uh, if they were in at home, they will have parents, they will have brothers and sisters to help them um, clean up the system, do a sort of soul cleaning of what they have passed through, because culture is very deep. But here now they are alone, and very soon they are pregnant or they have given, they have make their peer pregnant.
Right.
And when that happens, it means they become parents because you are not going to be aborting thousands of children, no?
Right.
Now, when you become a parent, you have not been prepared to become a parent. You don't even know what it means to become a parent. Now, what do you do? You are a parent. You are responsible for the life that you have brought to this world.
Hmm.
So now, when you multiply what have happened to them, the circumstances, then you can see that there is an argument that need to be talked about here for this community, for these people, as they groom their children to become future of the world that is going to come. So that
Hmm.
become important in line with what we are talking about today. But anyway, maybe we can leave that one so that we talk more about communication in workplace and the Gen Z.
Hmm.
So now you go to talk to the Gen Z. How do you manage to get to the level of their understanding in the sense that you can have a kind of a real rapport with them so that they can have a confidence in you, they can talk to
Hmm.
you, and you can talk to the employer of labor, and you can sort of be the go in between the two. Help me understand what is your strategy to do the middleman? No, actually, to do the middle woman.
Yeah. Yes, the middle woman. One of the things I have to say, maybe I'm blessed with, is that people naturally feel comfortable with me, like very quickly. So they confide in me, they tell me certain things. They're open. Of course, when you're doing group sessions and stuff like that, sometimes people are a little hesitant to start to talk. They're waiting on somebody else to start to talk before they talk. But it goes back to what I was saying about um, people wanting to feel seen and feel heard. So one of the things that I would even do before I go in for a session with anybody is I have a conversation with the management personnel, right? What are some of the issues you're having? What are some of the common things and regular things that you see taking place? Who who may be the biggest quote unquote troublemakers, right? Do you have any background on them? And all of these things help because I can say something during a session that I know may resonate with them, or it may um, be something that they can relate to, and that sort of opens a border for them. And then it's really going into a session without that high handed way about things. Because even in terms of coaching, I tell management personnel all the time, even the way you train staff cannot be the way you trained the baby boomers, right? It's a different approach. This whole PowerPoint thing, talk, 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 give you a handout, tell you read these 15 pages, those things don't work anymore. Okay. And I'm trying to get them to recondition their minds to that. It has to be a different approach, even with the Gen Xers, but surely with the millennials and the Gen Zers it has to be a different approach, right? So you're going into it with a sense of, okay, yes, I may be a person of authority or something in the room, but at the same time, I'm cool. So you try to make them feel comfortable. You try to be engaging. You try to let them understand that you're here to help them and to help management. Because a lot of times, even when you step into those situations, they think, well, oh, it's kind of like it's our fault and we need training, which is sometimes how management makes it look. It's not our fault, it's not our problem, it's our staff. They're the ones who need coaching, they're the ones who need correcting, they're the ones who need training. So you're going into those sessions with an aura to make them feel comfortable. It may take them a few minutes to warm up or whatever, which is another thing in terms of the warm up factor. Like you can't just go in there and start to, hammer at them with facts and data and all. Like, no, make it fun, make it engaging, be creative. People respond to that. And that is sort of how millennials and Gen Zers, like they don't like all of these too rigid structures with things. So there are times when you can be, a little flexible with how you do things and let them have a little fun. And it helps people to remember things too, to let it be memorable for them.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate this sharing and this important information about workplace communication, most importantly with the Gen Z. So now
Oh,
people
just
want to
one
learn
point
more.
I
Yeah, yeah,
wanted
please go.
to
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
raise with that in terms of coaching staff or staff training, however, people may want to put it. Organizations, like I was saying just now, they need to understand that there needs to be a different approach when it comes to training, but also when it comes to internal communications. The old way of doing things is, to send out a physical memo and in years gone by they would send it out via email, right? They just send out stuff and they say, well, okay, read this is what we're doing now. Or they send it through the middle manager and say, hey, tell your department that this is what's going on or this is what we're going to be doing. And sometimes you even find out things by the way. There is no real route for the dissemination of information. And that's another thing that needs to change within organizations, the way you communicate with your employees. And that way that I just talked about, it's very indirect, it's very cold. And I'm not saying you have to necessarily or all the time include your staff in decision making, but have a conversation with them. Invite questions. There's nothing wrong with somebody questioning a decision that you want to have. And sometimes your decision may impact their lives, right? So why not have a forum? Why not invite questions? Why not invite people to air their perspectives on things? A lot of times management has this stay far type of attitude, or we're up here and you down here. But if we can just say, well, okay, yes, I do have authority, but if you make it an environment or forum where people feel comfortable enough to share without being reprimanded or discriminated against afterwards, they would be surprised at how successful that could be. Of course, you'll have the few who, there will be problematic no matter what, but having a different approach can have different results.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with you. I agree with you.
Yeah.
There will sometimes always be those that will go offline, but generally there will be more. There will be better result if they have a more inclusive approach in
Yeah.
workplaces. Because now we see some of these manager who look at their work, their workers, the people that they are
Yeah, just a
managing,
robot,
as if they
just a
are, as if,
cog in the
in fact,
wheel. Yeah.
and it's not good. It's not. You need to treat human being with respect, because if you don't,
Yes.
the consequences is not going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we all need freedom. As a manager, you need freedom, but you also need to understand that the people that you are working with, they also need freedom.
Yes,
Treat them with
definitely.
respect. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, respect is a two-way street. There's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with people asking questions, and they need to understand as well. Yes, you have a concern, or you have a question or whatever. Ask it respectfully, or express it respectfully. And
Hmm.
in terms of management, respond to them respectfully as well.
Absolutely. All right. So, Nicole, if somebody want to contact you now,
Mhm.
maybe he want to do business with you, what is the best way to reach you?
You can reach me on LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn under Nicole. That's Nicole S dot J Farrell, Farrell. You can get me on WhatsApp at 1-868-746-0193. And there's also my email address. I always have to think about this. It's Nicole S. Farrell Image and PR at gmail.com.
All right. So you're going to get a lot of email coming to you. Sometimes there are going to be email that are proposing offer to you, which is a good thing, no?
Yes, and I
All
mean,
right.
I am open to training not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but in other countries as well, whether it's virtual or in person.
All right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, what would be your final thought today, considering what we have discussed about
Mhm.
Gen Z and how they affect workplace and of course communication in the internal of a company? What would be your final thought here?
An important aspect of things to remember is that it's a collaborative effort between management and employees, right? It's not for management to say, well, there's nothing wrong with us, it's them, right? It has to be a collaborative effort because management could put a lot of things in place. It doesn't mean that things are going to be successful. And in terms of the employees, you have to understand that a company is going to work with policies and rules and regulations. That's just how it is. However, there's nothing wrong with you expressing something or putting something forward. But you'll have to understand that to some degree, it has to be a collaborative effort. Otherwise, it's just going to be spinning top in mud, and it's nothing is going to be executed effectively, right? It's just going to be this merry-go-round all the time and with no results. So just remember that we're in the 2020s. So some of the ways we approach things and the way that we think about things, it has to be a bit different.
Thank you so much for that. I
You're
love
welcome.
that. That is a very nice conclusion. In that,
Thank
yeah,
you.
we must understand that things are changing. Time are going to change too. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
All
even in
right.
terms of how you may cook or you may do, some household hack or something. Some of those things have changed. With the evolution of time, there are gadgets and, there are all of these hacks and all of these things going around. So everything is changing, and sometimes we just have to change a little bit with the time. You can keep certain foundational things, but you have to make some changes here and there.
That's so true. That's so
Hmm.
true. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure chatting with you, Obehi.